Our next question comes to us from Samantha in Cape Coral, and Samantha asks, what can I do to stop automated messages from calling my phone? Samantha, that is a really great question because it gives me the opportunity to talk to you about an often overlooked federal statute that's called the Telephone Consumer Protection Act, the Telephone Communication Protection Act, or TCPA for short. So let me tell you a little bit about that. In a nutshell, the TCPA prohibits certain kinds of calls to certain kinds of phones. The most important part of the TCPA, in my opinion, is the section that prohibits the use of automated telephone dialing systems or artificial or pre-recorded voices for calls to cell phones. Now, there are different rules when it comes to landlines, but these days a lot of folks are ditching their landlines, sticking with their trusty cell phones, so I'm going to stick with the cell phone issue, okay? The TCPA prohibits the use of auto dialers or artificial voices to call cell phones. And the best part of that is that this prohibition applies regardless of the content of the call. So it could be a debt collector that you actually owe money to, or a telemarketer, or anyone else in the world. If you answer your cell phone and you are greeted by an artificial or pre-recorded voice on the other end, it's illegal under the TCPA. Now, there are two ways that an offender can get around liability under the TCPA, and you got to watch out for them. Otherwise, it might be a real easy way to defeat your potential case. The first way is if the call is an emergency. Now, practically speaking, I don't see how someone would use an automated voice to call your cell phone if there was an emergency, but that's the rule, so I wanted to put it out there and make you aware of it. The other way that an offender can get around liability is if you've given what's called express prior consent, and that's the bigger problem with these cases. For example, let's say you owe money to a credit card company, and they've started calling your cell phone and leaving automated voicemail messages. Chances are, when you originally signed up for that credit card, the credit card application asked you for a phone number, and you may have given them your cell phone number. If you gave them your cell phone number at that point, you unwittingly gave them express consent to call your cell phone. And that's a bummer if they're harassing you now with robocalls because they technically have permission to do so. So what can you do about that? Well, the first thing that I would do is write them a letter that affirmatively withdraws your express consent. I would tell them that you do not consent to them calling your cell phone anymore. Give them the exact number so they know what number they're not allowed to call. Tell them they're not allowed to call you at that number for any reason, and that you will pursue any remedies available to you under the law if they continue to do so. And then you sit back and wait. And if they call you again with automated voices, you got them. They can't state that they had express consent at that point because you withdrew your consent. So make sure you keep a copy of that letter you send them so you have proof of that in the future in the event that you do file a lawsuit against them. As your attorney, I'm definitely going to want to attach that letter to a TCPA lawsuit. So that takes care of the consent problem. Secondly, as I stated earlier, you're going to want to make detailed records of all the times that they call you. You want to have proof of their calls, especially under this statute, because your damages are directly related to the number of times that they call you. Under the TCPA, you may be able to get $500 in damages per phone call, and even more than that if it can be proven that the phone calls were made in willful violation. So for that reason, you definitely want to keep track of all your calls. The more calls you have, the more potential damages you have, and the more money you might be able to win at trial. Also, can't stress it enough, make sure to write it all down. Don't rely on your phone to keep track of everything for you. All right? So Samantha, if you're getting calls on your cell phone and you don't think you gave express consent to be called on your cell phone and they're automated calls or automated messages, get to a consumer litigation attorney. You might have a really good TCPA case, okay?